1. I'm not a particularly good-looking guy. I'm not tall or strong or athletic, and my jaw is not especially square. On a good day, I'm a 6. Having said that, I'm kind and occasionally funny, and women seem to think I'm safe. And so I end up with a lot of female friends, many of whom are affectionate in non-sexual ways. I'm married, so I don't feel like I'm being led on and don't pine for this affection to go further. For the most part, I just enjoy the attention for what it is. A couple of jobs ago, I had a co-worker, Jay, who was lovely and funny and charming. She and I became good friends for quite a while, but she mostly kept her personal space. It was the day that I met her husband, R, that she gave me a hug for the first time. He pulled up opposite the security door just outside our offices, and she and I happened to walk out at the same time. She turned and said goodbye, and gave me a very unexpected hug. That hug was potent. I get a lot of hugs, but this hug was like she melted into me for a moment. It couldn't have been more intimate or startling if she'd said goodbye with a full-on lip lock. It was after that hug that she said, "Come meet my husband." I'm not sure what expression was on my face when we walked up to the passenger side of the car and Jay introduced us. I was, shocked, maybe slightly, and involuntarily aroused, flushed. It had to look bad. I've told you about Evil Tedward. He's the coolest. I reached my arm through the open car window to shake R's hand. R was, I hate to say this, ruggedly handsome. He was irritatingly good-looking in a concert tee and jeans. He gave an upward chin motion of acknowledgement. He drove an older car that once had a bit of a cult following. A black Buick Regal Grand National GNX, I tend to notice. "Nice to meet you," I said. He replied, "Yeah." And as I withdrew from the car, Jay gently manhandled me out of her way as she opened the car door and got in. "See you tomorrow," she said brightly to me as they pulled away, tires chirping. There were some red flags, and I'm not oblivious. It occurred to me that this could have been a display to make her husband feel a little jealous. Some of our conversations had led me to believe that he showed more interest in video games than her sometimes, which I'll admit I thought was a sign of very bad judgment on his part. There really wasn't anything for me to do about it at that moment, but I decided to maybe avoid walking out of the office at the same time. Months passed, and though there was a few awkward days of low eye contact, things soon went back to normal. Still friends, no more random hugs. But Jay did occasionally touch my arm while talking to me, and I probably reciprocated. I mostly forgot about it. One day, Jay called our boss to say she wouldn't be in to work. I might not have even noticed if I hadn't had to take on some of her duties. I had to work about 30 minutes past my normal schedule, and when I left for the day, R was parked outside. I remember walking out, doing a double take as I recognized the car, and for a heartbeat, I started to walk towards the car, then thought better of it. One stride shifted his way, then immediately back on course to my own waiting car. He spotted me, got out of his car, and moved to intercept me. So I, of course, corrected again to meet him part way. "Hey, it's R, right? What's up?"
"Where's Jay?"
"I don't know, man. She called in."
"She called in sick?"
"I guess sick. I didn't take the call."
"Well, where is she?"
"I don't know, man. I've been here all day."
"So you don't know where she is?"
"I really don't. I mean, have you been home?"
"Yeah, I've fucking been home."
"Okay. Sorry, look. I'd tell you to talk to CR boss, but she left already." He was silent and fidgety for a minute, as if coming to a decision.
"Fuck it. If she calls you, can you tell her to fucking call me?"
"I don't think she has my mobile number," I said, truthfully. He made a sign of disbelief.
"Tell her,"
he said, and walked back to his car. I saw him get in his car and pull away from his parking spot, as I was getting into my car. I started my vehicle and began to drive towards home, but soon spotted his car behind me. Coincidence? I seem to recall Jay telling me that she lived north of the office, and I was heading southwest. I decided then to do something. Stupid, it was an impulse. I took a last-second turn into a motel parking lot. I wasn't sure where my brain was going, except I wanted to know for certain if he was following me. He'd been a few cars behind me, so he had taken time to make his turn with less drama. There was another exit from the lot, so I aimed for it and was soon back out on the road. He had to know he'd been spotted, so either he was going to stop following me or escalate the situation. He was on my tail, all pretense dropped. He was following me with no cars between us, and his car had a lot more horsepower than mine did. It was seriously lucky that I spotted 2 police vehicles parked in a parking lot, and I made a beeline for them, flash honking a few times as I approached. 4 officers got out of the cars and unsnapped the buttons on their gun holsters as I pulled in, with R right behind me. I stayed in my car, both hands on the steering wheel. R got out of his. I don't know what the hell he was thinking, but even as the officers were telling him to get back into his car, he was walking towards mine yelling,
Is she in that hotel? Were you meeting her here? How long have you been fucking each other?
The police understood the situation very quickly and interposed themselves. One of the 4 came to my car and asked me to exit the vehicle slowly and asked me to explain the situation. I offered yelling commentary as I was explaining what I knew, and at one point started to try to come my way, pushing past an officer who was not having any of it. R was in the back of a cruiser with bracelets reassuringly fast. It's a bit of a blur from there. I think the cops talked to me for 30 more minutes and only lectured me slightly for the way I'd driven towards their cars in the parking lot, cutting across lanes and honking. As for R, he should not have tried to shove a policeman out of the way. I'm pretty certain the cops didn't believe me that I was not screwing Jay. Have you ever recognized that you weren't thinking clearly but were unable to do anything about it? Intellectually, I knew it didn't matter whether they believed me or not, but on some level I was seething about it for days. I spoke to C the next morning in the office, and told her that I'd like the security guards at the office to walk me out of my car for a while. We didn't see Jay until a week later, when she came in to clear out her desk. She'd quit and was going away. Beyond that, she wouldn't speak to me, and I haven't seen her or R since. 2. For reference, I'm from Australia, female, and at the time I was about 15 or so. This story starts with me as a teenager living at home with my mum, stepdad Richard, and 4 siblings. Back in those days, and having 3 brothers, I was a pretty hardcore gamer. My mum was a pretty heavy sleeper since she was working full-time and caring for my stepdad, who had stage 4 testicular cancer, so I'd spend most of my nights staying up late gaming. One particular night at about 2 a.m., I could hear someone walking around the backyard. You know, that crunching of grass, the slight shuffle of boots on concrete. The fact that the family dog, Sammy, wasn't barking led me to believe that it was just my stepdad. My stepdad often walked around the backyard at night to help with his restless leg syndrome that was caused by the chemo. The restless leg would keep Mum awake, so he'd try to walk it off so she could get some much-needed rest. So as far as I was concerned, nothing was out of the ordinary, and I gamed on. Quite a bit later, I heard some noises in the kitchen, but I again assumed it was just my stepdad taking painkillers or making a sandwich, which was pretty normal. So I naturally ignored it and gamed on. I eventually went to bed, and when I got up in the morning, Mum was on the phone looking very shaken, and she motioned for me to sit down at the table. I was pretty groggy and out of it, but I started to feel a bit panicked. Mum was meant to be at work. She rarely had days off, even when she was sick, because she had 5 kids and one very sick husband to take care of. Finally, she gets off the phone and sits down. Mum tells me that during the night someone was in her room. She said that she thought it was my stepdad at first, and the conversation went something like this. I'm paraphrasing, it was a long time ago. "What are you doing?" She could see someone near her chest of drawers where her jewelry box was. "Nothing. Go back to sleep." "Richard, is that you?" "Yes. Go back to sleep." She was pretty out of it because she was half asleep, but she remembered that something about the whole exchange didn't feel right. She said that it didn't even sound like my stepdad speaking, and that she'd woken up because she heard something drop on the ground. She didn't think too much about it at the time because of how tired she was, so she rolled over and went back to sleep. In the morning when she got up, she saw that her jewelry box was on the ground, and a few pieces of jewelry were missing. including priceless family heirlooms that were willed to her by her late grandmother. She went to the kitchen and saw that her phone and my stepdad's phone was missing. So, using the landline, back when people still had those, she calls the police, and we later on learn the rest of the story. Our backyard faces a communal nature walkthrough type of thing. A man climbed our fence. There's a gate, but we always keep it padlocked, and walked around the house checking all the doors to get inside, which was why I could hear all that shuffling and scuffling outside. We later learned that my younger sister had snuck the family dog into her bed that night, which is why Sammy didn't bark at the intruder. My mum's bedroom has a sliding door into the backyard, but she never locked it, because she didn't see the point. The man had gotten inside through that door, and must have noticed the jewelry box, but it was obviously very dark, and he dropped it as he went to pick it up, thus waking Mum up. Once they'd had their little convo and Mum had gone back to sleep, he went into the kitchen and started looking for anything of value. He found the phones, pocketed them, and promptly left through the laundry door and over the fence. My stepdad had actually chosen that night of all nights to take a late-night stroll through the neighborhood to clear his head and help with the restless legs. He'd gotten back after everything had happened and was none the wiser until the morning. The police told us that we weren't the only people whose house was invaded that night. Apparently 4 other houses had been hit, and there was a huge priority on finding the perpetrator. And funnily enough, my mum and stepdad's phones were both found in someone else's house, so they thankfully got their phones back a few days later. A few weeks after this whole ordeal, we learned that the intruder has been found. Sadly, he'd sold the family heirlooms for drug money. Dude was just a scummy meth head, but he had a gun in his possession, and it was just luck that no one was harmed with it. He was eventually sent to prison. So on behalf of my mum, scummy meth head home invader, let's never meet again. Edit. For those wondering about my stepdad, the cancer did spread to his liver and lungs. However, he has now made a full recovery. He does still have the restless legs, ended up with terrible vision, and needs to take magnesium supplements for the rest of his life. But those are small prices to pay. 3. This happened when I was 18 years old, and in deep conflict with where I was going in life and who I was. That being said, I tried really hard to have friends and would often overlook a lot of things for the sake of companionship. I was working in the deli at a local co-op, and typically worked closing shift until 11 p.m. Usually nights were pretty slow, and we had a total of 5 people dispersed around the deli after 9 p.m. One night I was working the deli case when the overnight dishwasher approached me. Tom was about an inch or so taller than me, with greasy hair in a ponytail, and from what my coworkers said, I have a poor sense of smell, an odor that traveled with him. I would often catch him standing in the hallway that led to our dish pit, just staring at me. He stared at me just a little too long after he came up to me, and asked if I wanted to get high and watch Monty Python at his place. The fact that he was stoned made me slightly less alarmed and more humored that he stared at me for such long periods of time, but I wasn't interested in doing drugs in a secluded place with someone I barely knew. Being anxious and trying to be polite, I gave him my Facebook instead of my number, knowing it would say I was in a relationship and I wouldn't have to blurt out that I have a boyfriend. He apologized and said he didn't know and he wouldn't have asked me out if he did. I said I would be happy to be friends, but I didn't feel comfortable going to his house alone when I didn't know him that well. He then asked how I was supposed to get to know him at work, because he had to stay in the back. We would eventually start to take breaks at the same time. We talked a lot about our lives and the heavier things from our past. I talked about my past abuse and he talked about struggling with drug issues and the law. We would sit outside on summer nights while he smoked and I watched the stars, and we'd talk about philosophy and our ambitions. We had some very thoughtful conversations, although he seemed a lot more interested in my reactions to what he said than what I said. We also messaged on Facebook frequently. He was overtly sexual in a lot of his topics of conversation, but I knew he didn't have many friends to talk to, especially about his girlfriend. He occasionally made sexual comments about me, but they were mostly harmless at the beginning, saying I was attractive, my eyes were pretty, etc. He would also constantly ask me if I found him attractive. When I talked to him about it, he said he had a problem with boundaries and was insecure, but would try harder and that he was sorry. One night we hung out with a group of our co-workers after work. He offered to drive me and my co-worker. I accepted because I wouldn't be alone with him, and because parking at my complex became scarce late at night. We met up with other people there and had a decent night. He was conscientious about making sure I was comfortable and got me home safely. A week or so passed without many noteworthy events, but one night my friend and I were at the beach. It must have been around 12 to 1 a.m. when I get a text from Tom asking how to make French fries because he was too drunk. I asked my friend if she wanted to meet him and potentially get French fries, and she agreed, so we drove over. When we arrived, the stove was on with nothing in it. He was stumbling all over and his girlfriend was drunk and naked in the other room. He said he wanted to go to the beach too and drive to get French fries, so we took him to get food and go to the beach with us. Tom spent the whole night asking how kinky I was, if I'd ever gotten a rim job, and saying that he imagined bending me over the salad bar. Covering the salad bar with saran wrap was my job at night, and saying what else he wanted to do to me. I drove him home and brushed it off, yet again, assuming it was more the alcohol than him. He then progressively got worse. During one of our chats, he casually mentioned he could kill someone and feel nothing. He would flick his tongue at me when I walked by, and said he wanted to change his tongue piercing to a vibrator. He would tell me what he was into and claim it was friendly and platonic, and he was not interested in me at all. Now I know what you're thinking, but sadly I'm just as naive as the dumb people in horror movies that yell, "Hello!" and walk into the darkness looking for answers. However, this is where it all starts to click in my head. Our mutual friend and co-worker Scott overheard me talking to my friend about how every time I explain how Tom is crossing a line, Tom simply apologizes and keeps doing said creepy thing. Scott looked at me and asked, "Are you talking about Tom?" Slightly ashamed, I said yes. Scott pulls me aside and tells me in a hushed voice that Tom wanted to hang out as Scott had admittedly forgotten and took a shower. When he got out of the shower, Tom was just sitting in his house waiting for him. Scott and I kept our distance from him outside of work, but made occasional small talk while we worked with him. I remained unnerved that he knew where I lived. I remained unnerved every night when I covered the salad bar and could feel his gaze. About a week or so later, he got a new girlfriend and his harassment died down a little. It was less verbal and more just strange looks and staring at me. When I offered one of my male co-workers a ride home, Tom stared at him the whole rest of the night until we left. A different night, I gave another one of my male co-workers my number and told him we should hang out sometime. Sometime after that, I was in the back, gathering supplies to stock the espresso bar, and Tom came up to me and cornered me. He started asking why I gave my co-worker my number and asking if I wanted to have sex with him. I politely responded that it was friendly and pushed past him. I could always feel him watching me. About a night later, I was talking to that same co-worker when Tom interjected and said, and I quote, "Do you know what the difference between sexual harassment and what I do to you is? You want it." That was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I reported it to management and blocked him the next day. He was talked to and told he couldn't talk to me at work unless it was about work and work only. Management decided it was a good plan against my wishes to have this talk right before we started our shift together. Scott ended up coming in and standing by to make sure nothing happened. He claimed he had no clue why I reported him and called me a bitch to our mutual friends. He also quit a week later because there were too many dishes. Thanks for the nightmares and bringing up past trauma I told you about, Tom. Let's not meet. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 366. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, as you guys are getting this, it will be Monday the... something or other. What date will that be? It should be Monday the 28th by the time you guys get this. That means that, well, my week off will be over, and I'll be beginning work on the following 2 days' videos. If I haven't done a live stream at all during the week off, We'll probably have one later in the week. And if I have done while I was off, I expect I'll probably get bored at some point. Then we'll likely have another one later in the week anyway. And I'm trying to schedule them at different times so that everybody gets a chance to come in. So I might do one later. I've just about got my sleep back to where it is normal, so I'm not getting up too early, I'm not getting up too late. So that does let me do a stream at, say, for me it would be like 2 in the morning, whereas for you guys it might be about, I don't know, 7 or 8 o'clock at night, depending on where you live, of course. I'm talking about the American time zones, but I will try and shift them about so that people in other countries that do watch me are having more of a chance. I know if you're in Norway, there's only like an hour of a difference between our countries. I think you guys are like an hour ahead. But like I say, I'll keep shifting them about so that everyone has a chance to pop in. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.